Hey guys and welcome. Today we're going to be going over the exam style questions for the chemistry of life section. Okay, biology has a lot of application of scientific knowledge, so it's a good idea to remind yourself of the basics learnt at GCSE. Remind yourself of ionic bonds by answering these questions. Draw a diagram of sodium atom including the protons, neutrons and electrons. Okay, so if we quickly do that. So that's the atom 1, 2, 8, and there we go. Draw a diagram of a chlorine atom including the protons, neutrons and electrons. Okay, so that's the atom. Alright, now show how sodium and chlorine atoms can be turned into sodium chloride ions to form the ionic bond. Okay, so it's a transfer of electrons. If we add these together, the sodium will now transfer its electron because it is a metal, so it loses the electron in the outer shell, so we completely miss out the outer shell and have a new outer shell of 8 electrons. Right, so therefore chlorine will gain that one atom because it is that one electron because it is a non-metal, and so completing it going from 7 to 8. Draw it in here, and we need to show the charges. So it's lost one, so it has a positive charge, and it has gained one, so it gains an extra negative charge. Alright. 2. Draw one water molecule. Okay. We could do charges as well because that is the correct way. Using the atomic structure of oxygen and hydrogen, explain why the electrons are held closer to the oxygen atom. Okay, so we went through this. The electrons are held closer to the oxygen atom because it has 8 protons in its nucleus, which is more than the hydrogen atom, which has 1 proton. And so therefore, because of electronegativity, the negative electrons are attracted to this more positive area. Yeah. Now, explain how a molecule of sodium chloride can dissolve in water. Again, because we know that the polar charges on the water will attract the ionic charges on the sodium chloride. So again, so Na plus will be attracted to the oxygen, and so the chloride to positive hydrogen. And so this will make it easier for the water molecules to dissolve the ionic lattice of the sodium chloride, and so the polar charges will make water an excellent solvent. Right. Read through the following count about water, then write on the dotted lines the most appropriate word or words to complete the sentence. Okay. Water molecules are described as, well, polar. Yeah, but writing dipoles is still fine. Because they have a slight positive charge at one end of the molecule and a slight negative charge at the other end. These type of questions are less common in Edexcel exams. I think they've removed it altogether in a new spec, and so you won't come across these, but as revision it's good. So if you don't know it's polar, then you would read the second and third line, and then you should click that it's polar. That's the answer. This makes water a good solvent for salts and substances such as sugars. Bonds that form between water molecules are called hydrogen bonds. Some people abbreviate it and just write H bonds, but writing hydrogen is the correct word, so use that instead of writing H in the exam. Water is a good coolant because it has a high, specific heat capacity. which means that it takes a lot of heat to change it from a liquid to a gas. Water also has a high heat capacity, which means that a lot of energy is needed to cause a small rise in its temperature. Right. Fill in the table to show which ion is used for which purpose. Okay. So, again, they would have put this in the beginning of the book. So, nitrate is minus. Once again, I don't think it directly asked for, they're not going to directly ask for the symbols, that's more of a chemistry thing. And we know that's for the formation of DNA, RNA, and amino acids. Right, we'll move on to the second one, that is phosphate. And phosphate, we said, is for the formation of ATP, ADP, also DNA and RNA, and nucleic acids. And the third one is calcium, and we said that it's for the calcium pectate, and that is the middle lamella. And needed to produce chlorophyll, well, that is magnesium. It is Mg2+. There are many substances important to living organisms. These can be classified as cations, anions, polar molecules, non-polar molecules. Identify the following molecules using one of the terms above. Again, this won't come up in the exam. It's just generally testing you. Okay, so water is described as a polar molecule. B, the chloride ion, is described as an anion. So that would be B. C, sodium ion, that would be described as a cation, so that's an A. D is hydrogen carbonate, would be described as an anion because it has a negative charge. Methane would be described as a non-polar molecule because it does not have a charge. It's CHs, that it's non-polar. Yeah, it's not enough to create a polarity. Remember, in the previous videos we said that electronegativity depends on the position of the element in the periodic table, and so when it's closer to the nitrogens and the oxygens and the fluorine atoms, it will have a polar charge. Phosphate ion, again, it's negative, so it will be an anion, so it's B. 6. Acids release hydrogen ions into solution. Explain how hydrogen carbonate ions act to prevent the blood becoming too acidic. Okay, so you would learn about this later on, but we said that the hydrogen carbonate ion is an ion, and so it's going to attract the H plus ions into itself because it's positive, it's because of the opposite charges. And so what would happen is there will be fewer just H pluses in the solution, and so that decreases acidity because H plus is a proton and that is the acid. So if it's going to attract and combine with the HCO3, there's going to be less free hydrogen ions, and so the blood is less acidic. Right, a student wrote a title to her table of results in a water-based ink and then underlined in ballpoint pen. Her lab partner then accidentally spilled water over the page. The title smudged, but the underlining didn't. Use your knowledge of the properties of water and explain these observations. Okay, so we said that water is a solvent, and so it's going to be a solvent here for the water-based ink, because it mixed in with it. And so because the ink dissolved, and that's why it smudged. However, the biro is not water-based, and so it didn't dissolve and therefore it didn't smudge. Having done some research, the student decided that it would be more sensible to do her tables of results using a pencil. Use your knowledge of solvents to explain why this is a good idea. Okay, well, you know that pencil is graphite, something you've learnt in GCSEs. And so graphite is non-polar because it's only carbon. And so because of a non-polar substance, it will not dissolve in water. And so it won't smudge. And it will also not dissolve or smudge in other solvents like alcohol, because that alcohol and has a OH at the end. So this is polar in alcohol, and graphite is non-polar. So again, like dissolve like, so they're different. I will also put up a link in the description about the official answers that are published from the book. Okay, question 8. Draw the electron shells of the following atoms. Okay, that's GCSE. So if we just do it, carbon has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oxygen has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Sodium has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Argon is in group 8 and has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Use the information from the electron shells to state how many protons each of the above elements has. Again, that's as GCSE, and the number of protons is equal to the number of electrons. So this has 6 electrons. I'll have 6 protons. 8 electrons means 8 protons, and 11 electrons means 11 protons, and 18 electrons means 18 protons. Use the information of the number of protons to explain why CH4 is non-polar but H2O is a polar molecule. Okay, so the number of protons in the nucleus of an oxygen is greater than the number of protons in the nucleus of a carbon atom. So there is a greater positive charge, and so this draws the electrons from the hydrogen closer to the oxygen nucleus, causes a dipole. So we draw more this way, because again this has 8 electrons, and so this has this has 8 protons, and this has 1 proton, so that's more positive. So actually the negative electrons will go to the oxygen, which causes a negative dipole because you've got a concentration of electrons in the oxygen region, so it causes a negative dipole. But in the hydrogen now you've got a positive dipole because the electrons have moved away. Once again, this is chemistry, and it's in the it's shifting to A-level chemistry. You won't have to explain this in biology at Edexcel A-level. And so if you look at carbon and hydrogen, actually the polarities, the carbon is not very electronegative, so it doesn't have that power to attract the electrons to itself and away from the hydrogen. So if you can see, it has 6 protons, and so that's not going to make an effect. Use the periodic table to find the relative atomic mass of each element. Why is the number always bigger than the proton number? Okay, so the mass number is larger than the atomic number because the atom nucleus, it contains uncharged particles called neutrons. And so each neutron has a mass that's equivalent to a proton, so that's 1. So that's always why the relative atomic mass is larger. Yeah, this also is just GCSE and you won't ever be asked it. Looking again at the electron shells, explain why carbon can form 4 bonds, oxygen can form 2, sodium can only form 1 bond, but argon forms no bonds. Once again, GCSE is not going to be asked. But the number of bonds is determined by the electrons that would need to be gained or lost to form a full outer shell. So carbon requires 4 electrons to fill out the shell because it 4 extra electrons to fill out its shell, and therefore can form 4 bonds because it has 2, 4, so it would require 2 more. And oxygen require 2 more electrons to fill out the outer shell because it currently has 6. And sodium would lose 1. It won't gain 7 because again it's a metal, and metals lose electrons, and so it will only need to lose 1 to go back to its second shell, which has 8. And argon is already full because it's in group 8, and so it will not form any bonds, and so it's unreactive or inert. Okay, so that all won't really come up. I was just trying to test your knowledge from GCSE. Marion wanted to build a pond to breed fish in the north of England. Temperatures in this region can fall below 0 degrees Celsius in the winter. She was advised to make sure the pond was at least 3 meters deep and held 3.5 million litres of water. Use your knowledge of the properties of water to explain why such a large pond was necessary. Okay, so we know, so stating some facts, is water is most dense at 4 degrees, and so the ice that's formed will float. And so deep water will ensure that the pond does not fully freeze. And so the water, because it has a high specific heat capacity, is going to be slow to absorb or to release heat energy. So large volume minimizes the temperature fluctuations. That's so if you've got more water, it takes longer for it to boil, and if you've got more water, then it'll take it longer to freeze. So that's all to do with the properties of water. And moving on, finally, pond skaters are insects that can travel on the surface of water. Using your knowledge of the properties of water, explain how these insects can travel like this. Okay, so water molecules will form hydrogen bonds with each other, and because of the dipole between the oxygen and the hydrogen atoms, we will have attraction between other water molecules. And so the hydrogen bonds formed are stronger with the water and other water molecules than with the water and the air molecules. Therefore, the water will form a thin skin that's called surface tension. That's it.